I think we're targeting within Europe the oil sector because we know there is the possibility over the shorter term to start to reconfigure the global trade, having effectively more Russian crude and products going to other markets. So it's not quite a huge hit to the global market. And Europe can kind of survive this over a period of time. We can start to substitute in. It is a more difficult question for gas. Usually it takes about 4 to 5 years to build a new liquefaction terminal. And building those LNG export plants is the main strategy that Europe has for replacing Russian gas over the short term. So it does take longer to divert that. And that's why oil is being targeted ahead of gas.
I've got to say, James, I think the oil price has been remarkably well behaved, given everything from the supply side that is and has been thrown at it as well. We've seen, of course, Russian politicians naturally talking about, I think it was Mr. Novak who mentioned the $300 level per barrel for Brent if indeed Europe were to go ahead with this. Well, at the moment, despite those threats and those concerns, oil looks very well placed. If indeed Europe manages a successful substitution strategy, are we going south on Brent?
Well, I think one of the things that's been in the background holding things back on prices is just this background concern over the Chinese economy and the outbreaks of COVID there and the limitations on transport. So you've had this thing happening and counteracting some of the effects. But, we've looked at this in terms of the diversion of the short-term trade flows, and you are losing quite a considerable number of barrels from the global market if you do shut in everything immediately. And that's why we're talking about this phased introduction. And it's only very recently that Germany has really sort of backed round on that and said, we will actually want to go ahead with reducing Russian oil. So it's not out of, you've got to look at the wider context on this one. And, I think as a house, we're still looking at fairly bullish tendencies for the oil market.
So, James, as we think about which countries are going to effectively pay what the Russians are asking in rubles, give us your roadmap for how you think this story evolves across the rest of the year here, because obviously as they are still taking Russian gas, many of these countries will be desperately trying to source it from elsewhere.
Well, I think it's a very complicated web of who is going to subscribe to this new regime and who is not. Companies now caught in this minefield between the European Commission on the one hand and the Russian state on the other hand. The positions are not actually that so far apart in terms of what is being demanded. There is effectively one sticking point, which is by European governments giving or companies giving the order to Gazprom Bank to convert from euros and dollars into rubles. They are using the services of the central bank, which is a sanctioned entity. If they can get away from that, and there was a roadmap proposed by the Commission only a few days ago, basically saying that if you can stop the transaction and consider that complete at the point where you transfer the euros and dollars, this would not be a breach of sanctions. So I think a lot of European companies will be trying to stick to that guidance and say, look, we're fulfilling this within the realm of a traditional contracts. We're not actually breaking sanctions. And there is a way through. We've got some companies which are very intransigent. You've got Pignig, for example, and Bulgargas, which don't appear to have made any steps towards the ruble payment system. Same thing happened with Ørsted. We think Gasterra in the Netherlands is also not going to be making moves. But some of the bigger consumers, the Unipers, the Eni's, even the Greek state is moving towards the system. So we're expecting some contracts to be lost basically by payment due date next month. And that is going to be tightening up the European system as a whole. We don't have the mechanism to replace a lot of those volumes in the very short term, but over the next few years, we can start to have a more meaningful impact and replace Russian gas.